Hey, what is up, everybody? This is Steve Breach coming to you here today, making this video after listening to Tony Schiavone on what happened when Monday. Basically, him and Conrad Thompson talking about upcoming shows on the not on the WWE Network. This isn't something else to wrestle with, but basically on the MLW podcast, what happened when Monday. The upcoming shows coming up. They're going to be talking about Capital Combat 1990. This, of course, is the WCW pay-per-view where Sting showed up with his good buddy RoboCop. This is, of course, before RoboCop 2 came out, and this was WCW reaching out. In order to basically stay ahead of the show and see a moment in wrestling history that definitely is in the top 10 wrestle crap moments of all time, I decided that I was going to watch this show to see RoboCop. My intent was only to see the RoboCop segment with Sting, and although when you look at this show over the whole show as a whole, Capital Combat 1990 looks like one of those really good NWA shows. This was the second ever WCW pay-per-view, I guess you can say, after the Turner people moved in and basically took over running WCW. I think at this time that they were still using the NWA title. They hadn't really separated, but basically WCW was looked at as its own company as of right now. So the show, you got the Rock and Roll Express going up against the Freebirds. You've got Doom going up against the Steiners. There was Brian Pillman and Tom Zink having a match where they went up against, who did they go up against? The Midnight Express. You've got Bam Bam Bigelow and Cactus Jack wrestling against the Road Warriors at the beginning of this show. So there is a lot of really, really good stuff on here. I think overwhelmingly the wrestling on this show will carry you to the point where you think this is a really good one. But I'll tell you this. I thought Sting and RoboCop showed up in the main event to sort of save Lex Luger from the attack of the Horsemen. That ended up being on the middle of the show. So in order to try and see that, I actually watched the main event. And Ric Flair versus Lex Luger, and I guess you can call it the WCW Thunderdome cage, was one of the best cage matches that I've ever seen. I thought that it was really, really good stuff. At this point, in 1990, Lex Luger had, been a member of the Horsemen. He had separated from himself. Of course, Lex Luger was getting the push because of the fact that Sting, who was supposed to be the number one guy in WCW, injured his knee during a Clash of the Champions before Wrestle War. Wrestle War, the plan was to put the title on Sting against Flair. They had been building him up for 2 years, and they felt that Sting was going to be that guy to, I guess you could say, be the ultimate warrior of WCW and push them over Vince and make them a competitor in the wrestling game that people would take seriously outside of the southern states of the United States. So that's the reason why Luger was filling in. The Wrestle War was the pay-per-view before this, the first pay-per-view for WCW. That ended, I believe, in a disqualification or a count-out, or the match basically just got thrown out because Sting, who did injure his knee, was still able to make it to the show, and Sting actually got in there and was getting beat up by the Horsemen. Luger, who had a chance, I believe, to get the win, decided to help his friend instead, and the Four Horsemen were just able to overcome the odds because they had the numbers in their place, and that's how it went. This match honestly came down. The WCW Thunderdome, to me, always looks like it's a very marketable cage because of the fact that, when they would sell the ring for the action figures, if you bought the adaptation of the cage to go over your ring, it would be the spitting image. It's just, honestly, today, looking at the Thunderdome cage, it looks like if you were to try and climb it, that it's made out of, like, rope or twine, or it doesn't even look like it's made out of metal or anything that's going to hold up. I mean, the cage didn't fall down when Arn Anderson started to climb it. I believe Flair tried to climb up it at one time before trying to escape it. But it holds up. It just doesn't look like, like at this point, WWF would be using the blue bars steel cage that were made famous by like WrestleMania 2 or the Saturday night's main events between Bossman and Hogan. I'm sure there's other cage matches that you've seen along the way, but you know what I'm talking about. But the cage looked menacing. I mean, like you had to wrap your hands around it. Like you couldn't get your hands all the way around those cage bars. And basically the Thunderdome cage looks like it's made out of rebarb. It's probably the best thing that I could say. It just, the metal looks like it's this big around. It doesn't really have that, it doesn't look like if you got thrown into it, you would, get busted open, even though it happened to Flair during this. But it wouldn't look like, it'd really kill you if you ran into it. It even looks like you might be able to avoid it if somebody was trying to use it as a weapon on you. This match, Luger looked like he was going to win the title. Luger looked like he had this 100% in his favor, even though Woman, the manager, Ric Flair, was inside of the cell during the time this match was going on. And at one point, the referee actually found a weapon on her when he was trying to pat her down. Was able to take the weapon away from her, but basically during this match, we see the Four Horsemen. We see Ole, we see Arn, we see Sid just walking down to the ring, and you can already tell. I mean, the last pay-per-view already ended in a clusterfuck where basically it got thrown out, and now here we come again. The Four Horsemen coming down there to make this save and basically throw this match out. And WCW at the time, their production wasn't as good as the WWF. It wasn't as good as Vince, but they miss a whole lot of the action. We basically see the Horsemen strolling their way down to the ring, and as they get down there, we see a loud pop from the fans, and as the camera pans up to the set, we see Sting making his way down to the ring. This time, he doesn't have RoboCop with him. He's got El Gigante, who was supposed to be a huge star for WCW. He did not wrestle on this show. I don't know if this was his debut or shortly after his debut, or maybe people just hadn't seen this guy wrestle yet. But this guy ended up not being that good. And but he looked the part. He looked like he could get you, and if he got his hands on you, he'd swish it. But it just didn't pan out to what you were seeing during there. But basically, as El Gigante and Sting are running down to make the save, you just hear that Ole Anderson has raised the cell, and the cell comes up. Barry Windham, a member of the Horsemen, comes running down, slides into the ring, starts beating up Lex Luger. They basically call for a disqualification. We don't see Sting. We don't see El Gigante. We don't know where they are. But we see Arn Anderson slide back into the ring. Basically, he's going to just put a pounding on Lex Luger even more. Finally, we see Sting get down into the ring, and all of the heels from the Four Horsemen start to retreat. They make their way back up to the ramp where they're having an interview with Tony Schiavone, who's there to meet them. And we see all four members of the Four Horsemen standing there. Flair delivering a promo. Learn to love it. This is the Horseman. He's still the champion. To be the man, you gotta beat the man. The whole time, Flair's giving his promo. 2 feet behind him, Sting on camera, just waiting for his cue. And finally, after standing there for a few minutes of the Flair promo, decides he's going to come in, start beating up Ric Flair, starts beating on him. Arn's there, Barry Windham's there, Sid's there, Ole's there, all 4 of them just standing there watching him beat him up. There's 4 of them just to jump on him. But instead, you see Barry sort of pulling on Flair, trying to get him away. Sting's pounding on him. Finally, they separate him. And Sting makes his way back down to the ring to help out his buddy Luger, and the Four Horsemen take off with their titles. Second pay-per-view in a row for the new, I guess you can put the quotes on it, new company of WCW. Both of them in screw jobs. I understand that, Flair did put his foot down, said they guaranteed the spot of being the number one guy to Sting. Sting was going to come down. Flair thought that Sting was going to be more popular than anybody in the company, and they wanted to wait until Great American Bash. So, Flair refused to do the job to Luger. It wasn't that, Flair had any heat with Luger. Just said, hey, we said that we were going to give it to Sting. We're going to give it to Sting because this is something they've been working on, building up Sting for 2 years, and didn't want to just go away from it because of the fact that Sting got injured. So you got to tip your hat to Flair for making a star and sticking out with it until, I believe, the Great American Bash, when he comes back. And that's, of course, when you see the red, white, and blue face paint with the red, white, and blue jacket and the red tights that's made famous, that most people remember Sting winning the championship for the first time from Ric Flair. So that's right up around the corner. But this is a good show. This is a good cage match. But honestly, the ending with the production errors from WCW just throws this pay-per-view right out the window, where I don't even know why people would want to get the next pay-per-view, especially with the last two ending in clusterfucks they were, with the Horsemen just giving us a non-finish. So I don't understand WCW, but nobody ever will.